Chapter 8, Lesson 5, Declaring Independence. What to know? How did the 13 colonies cut their ties with Britain? How do they separate? Understand the people and events associated with the Declaration of Independence. Tell why the Declaration of Independence is important and identify its key political concepts. And words to study in Quizlet: independence, resolution, declaration, preamble, grievance, Articles of Confederation. And Thomas Paine, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, John Hancock, and John Dickinson. Declaring independence. You are there. Your friend waves a pamphlet in your face. This will change the course of history. You notice that the pamphlet's title is Common Sense. Your friend says, in here are all the reasons we should be our own country. The year is 1776, and battles between the colonists and British soldiers have already taken place. However, many colonists still hope that they can avoid an all-out war with Britain. Your friend tells you common sense is going to make everyone want to be free of Britain. In his pamphlet, or short book, titled Common Sense, Thomas Paine argued that the colonies should claim their independence. It's only common sense. Moving toward independence. We see here Thomas Jefferson's talents as a writer were well known to other members of the committee. Moving towards independence. Please set up your Cornell Notes on the left side. As we read, what are the most important ideas to take notes on? More colonists were starting to think that their differences with Britain could not be settled. One person responsible for this change in thinking was Thomas Paine. In his pamphlet, Common Sense, Paine wrote that the colonists should rule themselves. From Georgia to New Hampshire, people were reading and talking about Paine's pamphlet. Many began to call for independence, the freedom to govern themselves. It was the only way, they said, to have liberty. On June 7, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia slowly rose from his chair. He turned to his fellow delegates at the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia and said that the 13 colonies no longer owed loyalty to the king. He called for a resolution, or a formal group statement of independence. Resolved that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. Congress debated the resolution and chose a committee to write a declaration, or official statement, about independence to be sent to the king. The committee included Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania, John Adams of Massachusetts, Robert R. Livingston of New York, Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, and Roger Sherman of Connecticut. Thomas Jefferson, a 33-year-old lawyer who had studied government and law, used this knowledge to explain his ideas. The other members of the committee also added ideas, but Jefferson did most of the writing. Every evening for about 17 days, he wrote and rewrote the draft of the Declaration of Independence. What caused many people in the colonies to call for independence? primary sources, and the Declaration of Independence is a documentary source. It is a document that is a primary source. Analyze documents. This important document includes the idea that a government gets its power from the consent of the people. The government gets its power because the people agree to it. So here's the date, July 4th, 1776. The preamble, before it gets to all of the rest of it, the introduction or preamble. The Statement of Rights, the charges against the king, the Statement of Independence, and the signers of declaration. And notice the largest signature is John Hancock's. Here we go, the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson. Set up your notes. Thomas Jefferson carefully planned the draft of the Declaration of Independence. The first part, called the preamble, states why the Declaration was needed. Jefferson wrote that sometimes events leave a group of people no choice but to form a new nation. The next part of the Declaration describes the colonists' main ideas about government. It argues for liberty and equality. Those political concepts were stated with some of the most famous words in United States history. And these are words that we should memorize. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, mankind, people, are created equal, that they are endowed, provided by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The longest part of the Declaration lists the colonists' grievances or complaints against the British King and Parliament. Jefferson also listed the ways the colonists had tried to settle their differences with Britain peacefully, and they had for several years. In the last part of the Declaration, Jefferson wrote that the colonies were free and independent states. When he finished writing, Thomas Jefferson gave his draft to Congress. On June 28, it was read aloud to the delegates. For several days it was discussed and changes were made. Then on July 2nd, the delegates voted to approve Richard Henry Lee's resolution to cut ties with Britain. The American colonies had now said that they were free and independent states. On July 4, 1776, the Congress voted to accept the Declaration's final wording. Delegates from 12 colonies voted. New York had not yet given its delegates the power to vote. On July 8, crowds gathered at the State House, today called Independence Hall. Bells rang out, and Colonel John Nixon announced the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence. Members of the Second Continental Congress also listened as Nixon read. John Adams was so pleased by the people's joyful reaction to recent events that he wrote about them in a letter to Abigail Adams, his wife. He said that Independence Day should be celebrated from this time forward evermore. What important ideas did Thomas Jefferson express in the Declaration of Independence? Cultural heritage. Independence Day. The 4th of July, or Independence Day, is a national holiday. It is the birthday of the United States of America. The holiday was first celebrated on July 4th, 1777, with fireworks and the ringing of the Liberty Bell. Although Independence Day had been celebrated for many years, it was not made an official holiday until 1941. Famous art here. This is a famous painting of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and it shows the Second Continental Congress in what is today Independence Hall. Our next section, forming a new government. By August 2nd, a formal copy of the Declaration of Independence was ready to be signed by members of the Second Continental Congress. The first to sign it was John Hancock, the president of the Congress. So if you ever get this on a Jeopardy question, when was the Declaration of Independence signed? It wasn't signed on July 4th, it was signed on August 2nd. July 4th was when it was voted to be accepted in its final wording. A little trivia. Okay, so by August 2nd, a formal copy of the Declaration of Independence was ready to be signed by members of the Second Continental Congress. The first to sign it was John Hancock, the president of the Congress. He said that he wrote his name large enough so that King George III could read it without his glasses. The way he signed the document became so famous that the term John Hancock now means a person's signature. The work of the Second Continental Congress did not end with the final approval of the Declaration of Independence. With independence, a new government had to be formed. Congress quickly set up another committee. Its job was to develop a plan for how to unite the former 13 colonies into a new country. John Dickinson of Pennsylvania was chosen to head the committee to write the plan of government. The committee decided that the new states, the former colonies, should form a confederation. Remember, we had the Iroquois Confederation? This confederation of the United States of America would bring the 13 independent states together into a firm league of friendship. On July 12, 1776, Dickinson's report was presented to Congress. After debating the plan for more than a year, Congress finally approved it on November 15, 1777. The country's first plan of government was called the Articles of Confederation. Under the Articles of Confederation, the voters of each state would elect leaders to their state legislatures. These state leaders would then choose representatives to a national legislature called the Congress of the Confederation. Each state, whether large or small, had one vote in the new Congress. Each state had one vote. Until 1789, this Congress served as the government of the United States. The Congress made laws for the new nation and helped keep the states together during the Revolutionary War. What effect did the Articles of Confederation have on the new nation? Summary. Partly because of Thomas Paine's common sense, many colonists began to call for independence. Thomas Jefferson worked to write the Declaration of Independence. Later, Congress passed the Articles of Confederation, the country's first plan of government. And to review, how did the 13 colonies cut their ties with Britain? Number 3, what are some of the ideas described in the Declaration of Independence? And if you need a challenge, write a persuasive letter.